Had some questions on our board about AJ Harris working with the first team as it relates to Kamari Lassiter, and pretty much shouldn't read too much into that at this point, right?
No, listen, I think honorary DawgsHQ staffer and friend of the Georgia show and Bark After Dark, Matt Godwin, chimed in on that one and said basically that fastball period that Georgia was going through, when we saw him with the first team, is not a reflection of kind of first team offense, first team defense. They like to mix and match it there. And it's that portion of practice is basically, can a guy get a call, line up and play? And that is a really, really fast part of practice. They're trying to set the tempo of how they want to practice that day. It's a very quick period. They only did it for, Wes, maybe 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. And they did it so fast that they got three offenses and 3 defenses on the field, separately. So, I was more impressed by what I saw out of AJ Harris when Georgia was going with that Millennial Oklahoma drill, because I cannot remember who the receiver was. But he knocked the fire out of somebody. He just stuck and to the point he got up and kind of got in his feels there for a minute. He was so fired up about it. But listen, he's going to be a really good player at Georgia. And honestly, I'll be honest with you. I think he's got plenty of talent to play cornerback, but I think if he was the kind of guy that would walk into Kirby Smart's office, and maybe he is, maybe he's done this, I don't know. I think if he were to walk into Kirby Smart's office and be like, "Hey, coach, I want to be the best star I could possibly be," I think he could be an absolute freak show. I think he could be the best star, that Georgia's had. That's the Javon, but at least from a coverage standpoint, because he brings. You don't see a lot of cornerbacks. Your home. I think Todd Hartley talked about this, or maybe it was Mike Bobo, but one of these guys talked about it, where you've got to have a home base. Heck, it may have been even Glenn Schumann. I think it was Glenn Schumann. So I've ran through 3 of the 4 assistants we've talked about. But it was Glenn Schumann. It was Shu who said this. He said, you got to have a home base as a player. Well, I can't really recall. Tyreek McGee, I guess, and maybe a little bit of Mark Webb, that their home was at cornerback, but they played star. More often than not, it's kind of been your home's been safety and you've played star. So I would be really interested to see if he ever got a look at that, but I still think he can be a fantastic corner as well. Georgia's just got a lot of dudes at corner, man. A lot of dudes.
Is that maybe Georgia's deepest position group?
That or inside linebacker. It's one or the other. That's how awesome is it that you're that deep at those 2 positions? You're deep at the position that is going to rack up a ton of tackles and is going to call your defense, and you're deep at the most premium position on the field. And let's not forget that in addition to Nyland Green and AJ Harris and Dalen Everett and Daniel Harris and Chris Peel and Kamari Lassiter, who could very well decide to come back next year. They're also adding the number 4 prospect in the entire country and the nation's number 1 cornerback in Ellis Robinson, who is as ready to play coming out of high school, in my opinion, as any cornerback we've seen the last few years.
Yeah, we're going to get to Ellis later on in the show. It's interesting to look at those 2 position groups specifically back in the secondary and at middle linebacker. And you think about Kirby Smart's career, obviously he played in the secondary, and think about the dudes that played for him all the way back to his Alabama days. I know he talks a ton about building up that line of scrimmage, but if there's a hallmark of Kirby Smart's defense, it's just having wave after wave after wave of players in those groups. And, we've seen it just get better and better every year. It seems like, I keep saying it. I said it 2 years ago. I said it last year. Kirby Smart finally has the defense he's always dreamed of, and it just keeps getting scarier.
Yeah, for sure. And, in a lot of ways, I know that they'd like for the pass rush to be more dynamic, but, I'm a Denver Broncos fan. I've been a Broncos fan for, all the way back to the early Terrell Davis days. And even before that, long story short, we had a redneck satellite dish, and, we got Denver affiliates, and, for NBC, ABC, CBS, we couldn't get the locals because we didn't have the antenna, and get WALB out of Albany. But or not Albany, Albany.
Of course, yeah. They just didn't have the strength down there in Albany.
Yeah, Albany was about an hour and a half away, and sometimes it was tough to pick up WALB. But so I've always, but the Broncos won a Super Bowl on the strength of having 3 stud cornerbacks and being really good, having a really good pass rush. I mean, they had Aqib Talib, they had the Roby kid that's from Georgia and played at Ohio State, and then they had I think his name was also AJ Harris, or I can't remember, something Harris. But I remember those guys and those 3 cornerbacks, and when they went nickel, it was lockdown. And then you put on top of that having Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, it was such a dynamic, shut you down. I mean, if you get ahead of a team with those ingredients, they're done. Mm-hmm. They're absolutely done. They cannot chase points. You jump out 21-0 on a team like, or you carry a 14-point lead into halftime, and they've got to throw to catch up. I mean, you will absolutely just slice their throat every time. And I think that's something that Georgia can achieve. With some of this young talent they've got at outside linebacker. With Marvin Jones, with Darius Smith, with the guys that they signed this past year, Gabriel Harris and Samuel Mpemba, Damon Wilson. I mean, they've got a lot of talent at that young talent at that outside linebacker position. They got a lot of young talent at cornerback. Now that, Wes, I think if they could get those 2 things together at one time, would be Kirby Smart's dream defense. They almost had it. I think they lost a little bit of focus, and the COVID year may have hurt them a little bit. They almost had it with that, Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell and Azeez Ojulari and Jermaine Johnson. I think they were close to getting that one to click, but it didn't quite get there because that year just got so weird on them. But I think, and also I think they
had like 4 quarterbacks that year that they're trying to figure out.
But they were bad on defense at times that year too. Yeah. I mean, what Florida and what Florida and what Alabama did to them is atypical of what happens to Georgia defenses. And so I think that was, the defense wasn't as good as it could have been.
Well, Will Muschamp showed up and reminded everybody how to do it.
Yeah, that and they simplified some stuff. I mean, I think Kirby has come out and said that is they had rules on top of rules on top of rules that Florida, Dan Mullen kind of figured out how to exploit, and Alabama already knew how to exploit, and that kind of got to them a little bit.
Yeah. Well, when you're playing ball like that Denver Broncos defense you mentioned, it doesn't really matter who your quarterback is, but it doesn't hurt to have a good one. And that allowed Peyton Manning to ride off into the sunset. How many sacks does Mykel Williams get this year? This is from Munson's Broken Chair.
Ooh.
I will say, I'll just set a line. I'll say over under 3.5.
Oh, over.
Over?
Yeah, I'm taking the over on that for sure.
Yeah, I think 17 or 18. Somewhere in there. I'm cashing in on my Dana point right now. I'm just kind of jumping in on my man right here. No, I think it'll be somewhere around 8 to 10.
Okay,
7, maybe
I really
7
lowball him. I'm not in a.
Yeah, I was gonna say double digits to me doesn't seem totally out of the question. Now I'm not saying it's gonna be 17, but 10 seems doable.
And I'll tell you why. Double digits. I think, Roos, I think you're spot on here. Is unlike an outside linebacker where Georgia likes to put a guy on the field on 1st and 2nd down that can play the run, and then they like to switch that guy out and get him off the field on 3rd down and get a fresher body on the field. That position, Mykel is going to be on the field 1st and 2nd down, and then he's going to cycle back and he's going to play a different position on 3rd down and get matched up against guards. And I think that his ability to kind of rush the passer and play more snaps than those guys is going to be just massive. That, and combined with the fact that there's also going to be times where he gets to come in and eat on 3rd down because Tramel Wilther is one of the nation's. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, somebody I trust, and they were talking about that, how their metrics and how they look at things, that Tramel Wilther is one of the best run defenders in the country in terms of his ability to strike blockers and get off blocks. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling to think about what he has grown into there. And guys, that's why he started 13 games last year. I mean, that gets forgotten. Mykel started the first 2. He did a really good job, but Tramel came in and started those last 13 because they're like, hey, this is our run stuffer. This guy can strike blockers and take up 2 gaps and do exactly what we want him to do. And I think he's going to do a lot of that dirty work. And then Mykel's going to come in on 2nd and long, 3rd and long, pin his ears back and try to, make somebody look stupid. And he's going to overmatch a lot of dudes this year too, in my opinion.
I think, too, we're going to be talking about, at this time next year, we're going to be talking about Mykel Williams the way that we're talking about Brock Bowers in terms of, like, what the NFL thinks about him, where this is all headed. I'm not saying he's going to end up on the Georgia Mount Rushmore, which we did today, but I think that he has a chance to garner the hype based on this year that Brock's kind of leaning into this year based on just his level of ability. I think that Mykel is a guy that is going to have the NFL drooling over him after this season.
Who was that defensive end, that 5 tech that got drafted by, I believe it was the Washington football team? What's their name now?
Chase Young?
No, he played at Alabama. I think his last name was Allen.
Is
it Jonathan Allen?
Yeah, it was Jonathan Allen. It was.
Okay.
Yes.
There was another Jonathan Allen too, right? When there was Here, that's kind of what I think he can do. Now, I know that's lofty, kind of lofty there, because I believe Jonathan Allen had like 19 or 21 tackles for a loss one year. I don't know that Mykel's going to do that because Georgia plays guys so much and they rotate so much, but I think he can put up a monster season, from that position like few can.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I set the number kind of low, I guess, just because based on last year, Mykel had 4.5. And it's just that no-name defense. I don't know. Maybe I can't escape that mentality, and I think that it's just going to be spread amongst a bunch of different guys. But maybe Mykel breaks out and just has an Aziz junior year type of season.
It wouldn't shock me if like we look back and it's like, man, he only had 3.5 sacks this year, but he was really good.
I think he'll have more than that, for the record. Yeah. Obviously. All right, I'll hop into. All right, here's DawgsHQ. What is something Georgia could currently do that it has not already done that would solidify us as a dynasty? I mean, I think the three-peat is the most easy answer. I guess if that's not what you're looking for, winning 3 titles in 4 years, if it doesn't work out this year, I mean, they're knocking on the door of the dynasty talk right now, and they're everybody's sweetheart, except for Reese Davis, who, if a Georgia fan sees him, I hope you're wearing a metal hat because they're going to try to scalp you for not putting them number 1 overall. But other than that, man, everyone is picking the Dogs.
I mean, realistically, too, people listen. The hype is what the hype is, and so people are going to be disappointed if Georgia doesn't do it for a 3rd straight time. But realistically, I think going back to the playoff solidifies where you are. I mean, ultimately, I think that's where you got to get back to. Now, it's tough to win there because you're going to be going up against some similarly talented teams, and it got tight with OSU last year for sure. So, to me, though, getting back, keeping yourself in that hunt is base, and coming off of the 2 national championships, I think that continues that.
The only way you're getting to dynasty status in short order is you got to win it this year. I mean, even getting back, I think, folks are going to still say, well, you got to win 3 out of 5. That's a dynasty. And I agree. I do kind of agree with that. I mean,
but you've got a chance to get 3 out of 5. I mean,
3 out of 3.
I mean, and that goes into the overall resume. Those are kind of tiebreakers when you start talking about dynasties.
Right.
You're like, hey, man, they've made the playoffs in 4 straight. Let's say Georgia just makes the playoff this year, and then they don't win it, but they make it next year and they win it. Well, then you start to say that, hey, that's among the best 4-year runs in the history of the sport.
Yes.
That's where you get to with that. But I think Georgia can win it, and then they're a dynasty without question. Yeah. They're a dynasty that lasts for the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And that's the way you get there. The only other way is to like bring in Red Panda or Savannah Bananas to do something at halftime. I mean, those are the things you can control.
Have the Bananas play a game while the Redcoats are on the field.
Yeah, I mean,
Red Panda really, given where Georgia is as a football program right now, I agree with you. I think take it really over the top. If you put Red Panda out in front of Sanford Stadium, it would go wild. You'd probably get a louder cheer for that than anything that you're going to get at a home game this year, given how bad the schedule is.
Oh yeah, no, I
think they need to be working the phone. I don't know if Red Panda can do grass though. I think she's like the anti Lionel Messi. Like she has to have some sort of surface down there.
Tire on that thing, man. She can go out there and chug her.
She'll get an all terrain on that
no doubt.
on that unicycle, baby.